She pressed her forehead lightly against the bus window and let the vibrations steady her breathing. The city slid past in familiar fragments. Shuttered shops, school gates opening, people clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Everyone looked like they were going somewhere important. She wondered if they felt as tired as she did, or if exhaustion was something that marked her differently now. By the time she stepped off the bus, her face had settled into the expression she wore for the world: calm, capable, unreadable. Work was a small office that smelled faintly of paper and old carpet. She arrived early as usual and turned on the lights herself. The quiet there was different from the quiet at home. This one expected productivity. She logged into her computer, answered emails, checked numbers that never seemed to add up in her favor. Her coworkers drifted in slowly, greeting her with polite smiles and surface-level questions. "How's your son? You look tired." "Busy weekend," she answered automatically, never offering more than necessary. Explaining herself felt like work she wasn't paid for. By mid-morning, her head throbbed, but she ignored it. There were deadlines. There were always deadlines. She moved through tasks with efficiency born from necessity. Mistakes cost time, and time was something she never had enough of. At lunch, she ate alone at her desk, scrolling through photos of her son she'd taken without thinking. Blurry pictures, crooked smiles, moments she didn't trust memory to keep safe. She checked her bank balance and closed the app quickly. Some numbers were better left unseen until absolutely necessary. The afternoon dragged. When her phone buzzed, her heart jumped before she even looked. It was the school. It always was. This time it was nothing serious. Just a reminder about an upcoming event. She probably wouldn't be able to attend. She thanked them anyway, hung up and stared at the wall longer than needed. Guilt had become background noise in her life. Constant, low, impossible to silence. When work finally ended, she packed up quickly. She didn't linger the way others did, chatting about plans and dinners and shows they were watching. Her plans were fixed. Pick him up, go home, make dinner, help with homework, repeat. There was comfort in the predictability, even if it sometimes felt like a cage. Outside, the air was cooler. She pulled her jacket tighter and walked fast, replaying the day in her head, already calculating the evening ahead. At the school gate, she spotted him instantly. He was talking animatedly to another child, hands moving as if the story required his whole body. When he saw her, his face lit up and he ran toward her, backpack bouncing against his back. "Mama!" he said, breathless. "Hey," she replied, kneeling slightly to steady him. "Good day." "The best," he said without hesitation. "We learned about planets and I'm going to be an astronaut." She smiled. "That so?" "Yeah. And I saved you the purple crayon because you like that color." Something in her chest tightened. "Thank you." They walked home together, his voice filling the space between them. She listened, truly listened, even when her mind begged for rest. These moments were fleeting. She knew that. One day he would stop telling her everything. One day he would walk ahead instead of beside her. At home, she moved through dinner preparation on autopilot. He sat at the table doing homework. Asking questions she answered patiently even when she wasn't sure herself. They ate together, simple food, shared silence that felt safe. Afterward, she washed dishes while he played on the floor, occasionally looking up to make sure she was still there. Bath time came and went. Pajamas, teeth brushed. A story read from a book whose pages were worn thin. When she finally tucked him into bed, he reached for her hand. "Will you stay a minute?" he asked. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding his hand until his grip loosened. She watched his eyes close, watched sleep take him gently. In the quiet that followed, the weight of the day settled fully on her shoulders. She stood alone in the doorway for a long time before turning away. The house felt different at night, louder somehow despite the silence. Every creak, every distant sound felt amplified. She cleaned again even though nothing was dirty. Folded laundry she'd already folded once. Straightened things that didn't need straightening. Stillness made room for thoughts she didn't want. Eventually, she sat on the couch, lights off, phone in her lap. She thought about the life she'd imagined once. The one that included partnership, shared responsibility, laughter that wasn't always followed by worry. She wondered where that version of her had gone, or if she had ever really existed. Her phone buzzed with a message she didn't open. Some people were easier to keep at a distance. Explaining her life felt impossible. How did you describe being both full and empty at the same time? How did you explain loving someone so much it terrified you? She leaned back and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. It always did, and when it did, she would wake up before the sun again. She would keep going. Not because she was strong in the way stories like to portray, but because stopping was not an... The days began to blur after that, not because they were empty, but because they were full in the same way every time. She woke before the sun, moved through the hours, and returned home with just enough energy to begin again. Time no longer felt like something that passed. It felt like something she carried. Some mornings she caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face held lines she didn't remember earning. Her eyes looked older than her years. She touched her cheek once, as if checking whether she was still there, then turned away before the feeling could deepen. Money became a constant calculation running quietly in her mind. At the grocery store, she added items to the cart and removed them again, weighing wants against needs. She learned which brands were cheapest, which meals could stretch for 2 nights, which cravings to ignore. At the register, she held her breath until the total appeared. Relief washing over her when the card went through. Relief never lasted long. It was always followed by the reminder that she would have to do it again next week. Her son noticed more than she wished he would. He asked why she didn't buy snacks like the other kids' parents, why she worked so much, why she sometimes stared into space when he was talking. She answered carefully, choosing words that wouldn't burden him. She told him they were doing their best. She told him everything was fine. Sometimes she even believed it. There were evenings when exhaustion overtook her before patience could intervene. On those nights when he spilled something or refused to listen, her voice rose sharper than she intended. The look on his face afterward stayed with her long after he forgave her. She would apologize, pull him close, promise to do better. Alone later, she replayed the moment again and again, wondering how love and frustration could live so close together. Weekends were harder than weekdays. There was less structure, more time to think. She filled them with chores, errands, small outings she could afford. The park was their favorite because it cost nothing. She sat on a bench watching him climb and run, his laughter carrying across the open space. Other parents sat nearby in pairs or groups, talking easily. She nodded politely when their eyes met, but rarely joined in. It wasn't that she didn't want connection. She just didn't know where to fit herself anymore. At night, after her son was asleep, memories crept in uninvited. The early days of motherhood when she wasn't alone yet. The plans she'd made, the trust she'd given. She didn't miss the person who left, but she missed the version of herself, who believed things would work out, without so much effort. She wondered if that kind of hope was gone for good. Sometimes she imagined what it would feel like to rest without guilt, to sleep until her body woke naturally, to make a decision without considering how it would affect someone else first. The thoughts felt dangerous, selfish even, so she pushed them away. Wanting more felt like a betrayal of the life she had built for her son. There were small victories she didn't talk about. A bill paid on time. A compliment from her supervisor. Her son reading a sentence on his own for the first time. These moments didn't change everything, but they softened the edges. They reminded her that progress didn't always announce itself loudly. One evening, while folding laundry, her son looked up at her and asked, "Are you happy, Mama?" The question caught her off guard. She paused, a shirt halfway folded in her hands. She searched his face for worry and found only curiosity. "I'm okay," she said after a moment. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to his game. She finished folding slowly, her chest tight. She wondered what happiness looked like to him. She wondered what he thought he was seeing. That night, lying in bed, she let the question linger. She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew this much: she was still here, still trying, still loving, and for now that had to be enough. Time shifted quietly the way it always did, without asking whether she was ready. Months passed, marked not by dates but by changes she noticed only when she stopped to look. Her son grew taller. His questions grew more complex. His silences grew longer. She began to understand that motherhood wasn't just about keeping him alive anymore. It was about learning when to hold on and when to let him stretch away from her. Her body started to betray her in small ways. A sharp pain in her wrist that lingered too long. Headaches that arrived without warning. She ignored them at first. There was always something more urgent. Pain became another background noise, like the hum of the refrigerator or the traffic outside their window. She told herself she would rest later when things were easier. Later never came. At work, expectations increased without ceremony. More responsibility, same pay. She accepted it without protest. Saying no felt risky. She couldn't afford risk. Some evenings she brought work home, her laptop glowing in the dark while her son slept. She typed quietly, shoulders tense, heart racing as if she were constantly about to be discovered, exposed, told she wasn't enough. There were days she felt invisible, truly unseen, not in a dramatic way, but in the slow erosion of being overlooked. Conversations happened around her. Decisions were made without her input. She smiled, nodded, complied. It was easier than reminding people she existed. At home, though, she mattered. Every scraped knee, every lost toy, every bad dream found its way to her. That was where she was necessary. That was where she anchored herself. One afternoon, she received a call from the school asking her to come in. Her stomach dropped immediately. She left work early, heart pounding, rehearsing worst-case scenarios. When she arrived, her son sat in a small chair outside the office, feet swinging, eyes downcast. He looked up when he saw her, relief washing over his face. "He got into a fight," the teacher said gently. "Nothing serious. Just emotions running high." She knelt in front of him, searching his face. "What happened?" He shrugged. "They said you don't come to school things because you don't care." Something cracked inside her, quiet but deep. She stood slowly, thanked the teacher, signed the papers. On the walk home, neither of them spoke. At the door, he finally broke the silence. "I know you care," he said quickly, as if afraid she might think otherwise. She pulled him into her arms and held him longer than usual. "I always care," she said, "even when I can't be there the way I want to be." That night, after he was asleep, she cried without trying to be quiet. The tears came from a place she hadn't touched in a long time. Guilt, frustration, fear all tangled together until she couldn't tell them apart. She wondered how many moments she would miss chasing survival. She wondered what the cost would be for both of them. The next day, she requested time off for the next school event. It meant rearranging bills, sacrificing something else, but she did it anyway. When the day came, she sat in a small chair in a crowded room, clapping too loudly, smiling too wide. When her son spotted her in the audience, his face lit up in a way that stayed with her long after the event ended. She realized then how much presence mattered, even when it was imperfect and infrequent. Life didn't become easier after that, but it shifted slightly. She began making small adjustments, not to fix everything, but to breathe. She stopped answering emails late at night. She allowed dishes to sit sometimes. She let herself sit beside her son without multitasking, even if only for a few minutes. She started walking in the evenings after dinner just around the block. At first it felt indulgent, then it felt necessary. The movement quieted her thoughts. The air reminded her that the world was bigger than her worries. Sometimes her son joined her, talking about his day. Sometimes she walked alone, listening to her own footsteps, relearning what it felt like to exist without urgency. One evening, she ran into someone she hadn't seen in years, a former friend. They exchanged polite words, surface updates. "You're doing everything alone?" the woman asked, surprised. She nodded. "Yes. That must be hard." "It is," she said simply. The honesty surprised them both. There was no explanation, no apology attached. Just truth. At home later, she thought about that exchange. How rarely she allowed herself to name difficulty without minimizing it. She began to wonder what might happen if she stopped pretending everything was manageable. Gradually, she let small pieces of herself surface again. She read at night instead of scrolling. She wrote notes to herself the way she once wrote dreams. She remembered things she liked that had nothing to do with survival. Music, silence, warm showers, taken slowly. Her son noticed the changes before she did. "You smile more," he said one morning. She paused. "Do I?" "Yeah," he said. "It's nice." The comment stayed with her all day. There were still setbacks, bills that arrived unexpectedly, days when exhaustion flattened her, nights when worry returned full force. but something inside her had shifted. She no longer believed she had to disappear to be a good mother. She began to understand that caring for herself wasn't a luxury. It was part of staying. One night, as she tucked her son into bed, he asked, "Do you ever get scared?" She considered the question. "Yes," she said. "All the time." "What do you do?" "I keep going anyway," she said. "And I talk to myself kindly when I can." He nodded, absorbing this like a lesson. "I'll do that too." She kissed his forehead, heart full in a way that felt steady rather than fragile. Later, lying in the dark, she thought about how survival had once been her only goal. Somewhere along the way, without noticing, she had started living. The change didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, disguised as routine, settling into her days the way dust settled on shelves she no longer noticed. She still woke before dawn. She still worked too much. She was still tired. But there was a difference now in how she carried herself through it. She no longer moved as if bracing for collapse. She moved as if she expected to endure. Her son entered a new phase of questions, the kind that didn't have clear answers. Why people lied, why some parents stayed and others didn't, why love sometimes hurt. She answered the best she could, choosing honesty without bitterness. She was careful not to let her wounds become his inheritance. Some nights, after he fell asleep, she replayed her answers in her head, wondering if she'd said too much or not enough. At work, she finally said no once, just once. The word felt foreign in her mouth, heavy with risk. Her heart raced as she waited for consequences that never came. The world didn't end. No one punished her. The realization lingered longer than the moment itself. Maybe she had been allowed boundaries all along. Maybe she had just been too afraid to test them. Her health demanded attention in ways she could no longer ignore. One morning, she nearly fainted while getting ready. The room tilted, her vision narrowed, and for a moment fear cut through her like cold water. She sat on the edge of the bed until the world steadied. That afternoon, she made an appointment she'd been postponing for years. Sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by strangers, she felt exposed and small, but she stayed. That felt like progress. The doctor talked about stress, about rest, about care she had deferred for too long. She nodded, embarrassed by how obvious it all sounded. Walking home afterward, she felt lighter in a strange way. Naming the damage didn't fix it, but it made it real. Real things could be tended to. Her son started spending more time with friends. Playdates replaced afternoons at the park. He didn't need her presence in the same way anymore, and that both relieved and unsettled her. She reminded herself that this was the goal: independence, growth. Still, when the house grew quiet in new ways, she had to sit with the feeling instead of rushing to fill it. One evening, while helping him with homework, she noticed how easily he laughed now, how secure he seemed. The realization hit her slowly and then all at once. Despite everything she thought she was failing at, something had gone right. He felt safe. That mattered more than perfection ever could. She began to think about the future differently. Not in sweeping plans, but in small questions. What would she want when he no longer needed her constant presence? Who would she be when survival was no longer the only priority? The questions scared her, but they also felt like an invitation. He no longer measured her worth by how much she endured. She measured it by how present she could be with him and with herself. There were days she still fell short. Days she lost patience. Days she felt the familiar weight settle back onto her chest. But now she recognized it as temporary. She knew how to breathe through it. Late one evening, sitting alone after her son had gone to bed, she thought about the woman she had been at the beginning of all this. The fear, the exhaustion, the constant doubt. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her something simple. You survive this. You become more than this. You don't disappear. She turned off the light and went to bed. Not because everything was finished, but because rest was no longer something she had to earn. It was something she allowed. Tomorrow would come, as it always did. And when it did, she would meet it not as someone merely holding things together, but as someone slowly, deliberately building a life that belonged to her, too. One night, her son asked if she ever felt lonely. She didn't answer right away. She sat beside him on the bed, thinking. Sometimes, she said, but not in the way I used to. He looked at her thoughtfully. I don't think you're alone, he said. You have me? She smiled, but gently corrected him. I do. And one day I'll have other things too. That won't change how much I love you. He accepted this easily, the way children often accept truths adults struggle with. As the seasons changed, she noticed herself looking forward to things again. A walk at dusk, a quiet morning, a conversation that didn't revolve around logistics. None of it was dramatic. All of it mattered. Someone merely holding things together, but as someone slowly, deliberately building a life that belonged to her too. There were moments when the past tried to pull her backward. A familiar street, a shared memory triggered by a song. She allowed herself to feel it without staying there. Healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about not letting memory decide her direction.